It's time for the Margin Matters Minute with Money Man Jason Brown.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of Margin Matters Minute. My name is Jason Brown, and today we're talking about the student loan debt crisis and more specifically, the student loan debt forgiveness situation. And I'm so excited to have an economist joining me to help shed light on a lot of these questions that I have unanswered. So today we have my very special guest, Dr. Steve Petty, who is an economist. Dr. Petty is a graduate from Oklahoma State University, where he earns his PhD in economics. He is also an assistant professor of economics at Flagler College in Tallahassee, Florida, which I'm being told is the state capital of Florida. And Dr. Petty is also the former chief economist for Florida Tax Watch. And he specializes in the investment research, strategic planning, and economic forecasting. So without further ado, Dr. Petty, thank you so much for sharing some time with us tonight. Thanks for being with us.
Jason, it's a pleasure. And anytime I get to talk about economics, it's a very enjoyable event.
Awesome. I really, really appreciate this. And before we jump into the questions, I had emailed Dr. Petty a list of all my questions of things that I need help understanding. And he's been very gracious to join us. But so before we jump into that, shameless plug is I'm actually writing a book that Dr. Petty, this interview will be a part of my book as well. So the name of the book is I Did It, How I Earned 2 Debt-Free Degrees and How You Can Too. So as you can see, I'm actually going to be writing a book that is going to be surrounding this whole topic of student loan debt crisis. And this interview with Dr. Petty, some of his thoughts will be included in the book as well. So just wanted to mention that. So let's just dive right into it, Dr. Petty. Just the first question is just a general overall question is, what are your thoughts on this whole situation with this student loan debt crisis, which now I think it's kind of hard to keep track of the numbers, but I think it's kind of hovering around 1.65 trillion. So what are your just general thoughts on the situation? Is it a crisis?
Yes, it's a bona fide crisis. And let me say this about Jason. I'm a bit envious with him having 2 debt-free degrees because I went the other route. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jason wanted me to speak about student loan debt and the forgiveness of it. I currently, at the age of 57, am still paying on my student loan. And the route that I went was one where I wanted to start a family early, and that figured into the equation. And yet, once I had taught in higher education, I knew that I wanted to do it as my career. That meant going on and earning a PhD, which for me meant student loans. So I'm part of this crisis. I am very fortunate, though, to be what I consider fully employed. And even though there's been some bumps in the road, I tell you what, right now, being an economist can be a tricky profession because some of us go into higher education, others government, others the private sector. And I've been at least close to all three, but definitely hit deep in 2 of them. Now, just to think about this crisis in an overall way, student loan debt, why do people get in debt for that reason? It's because higher education is an investment. It's an investment in the individual's human capital. Capital is anything that makes labor more productive. And as human beings who have to work for a living, we want to make our labor as productive as possible. But we're not born with a silver spoon in our mouths all the time. So oftentimes we have to find a way to finance that higher education. Student loans are one option. And it's best that if a person is going to go that route, to do it while they're early. That's true for both the higher education and the student loan debt, because you want to have a period where you can pay the loan off and experience all the benefits of a higher paying job afterward due to your higher education paying off for you. So I consider my student loan debt to be the riskiest gamble that I ever took. But I'm a risk averse person. And that's as tricky as it came for me. But for a lot of people, and I think it was for me too, it's really the only option to get that higher education as fast as possible. I was a good student, but I'm not a genius. And so I had to work hard in all my coursework. Uh, I wasn't able to graduate ahead of time or anything like that. So I'm in this boat, and it's a big one. Or you might say there's a lot of people in this boat swimming in the sea of debt. And out of that 1.6 trillion, at least a quarter of it right now is in either deferment, forbearance, or actual default.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was that. I didn't realize it was that high.
yeah.
Okay.
Because the job market can be fickle, and so there are work risks associated with this, and that's why banks don't do it on their own. They want to have these loans guaranteed by the federal government.
Very interesting. So, Dr. Petty, the next question, actually, it's going to be the next two questions kind of go together, but I'll ask them separately. So, it's kind of a two-part, but we'll just do one at a time. So, the next one is, this is the rhetoric right now in the media and in the society, and kind of the narrative that you're hearing with a lot of the politicians is that the forgiving of the student loans is going to boost the economy, right? This is what they want you to believe. This was one of my biggest questions was, is that true, or how is that actually going to work? Or, what kind of results would we see? What exactly does that mean, boost the economy? That's kind of a general kind of term. And share a little bit on the other thing before we let you get into that, but is there's such a small percentage of people that actually have student loan debt. Now, what you'll hear in the media is 45 million adult Americans have student loan debt. Now, that sounds like a lot of people. It is a lot. 45 million is a lot. But then when you look at that as a percentage, I think it's somewhere around maybe 20% of adult Americans have student loan debt, which means 80% of Americans do not have student loan debt. So that's why I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around, if you're going to forgive, it's just a small percentage of the population that has the student loan debt. Would that still boost the economy? So what are some of your thoughts on that idea, I guess?
Yeah, this is one of the toughest questions to address. Usually when economists start talking about boosting or stimulating the economy, it's when we're in the throes of a sudden, severe recession.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the economy is down now. We also know the reason why. It's due to COVID. And as soon as we can get the vaccine out and the majority of people inoculated, then that's not going to be such a drag on the economy anymore. But for those Americans who are having trouble paying their student loan debts, this is just misery for them. Some of them are still trying to climb out of the kinds of jobs that are essential yet low paying. And if they get sick or they lose that job because, maybe it's in a bar or a restaurant and those are closed down, it just makes it so tough on them. They get knocked back, more than one step for sure, for every one step that they try to take forward. Now, student loan debts have always had strings attached. I think if we could change the nature of that a little bit, then you could have loan forgiveness and actually boost the economy. But it's not the big panacea that some would have you believe. And what I'm talking about is there are ways to have student loans forgiven for certain kinds of employment, especially if you say teach in a distressed area, things like that, work certain public service jobs for governments. But if there was a way to target that, tailor it even closer to where more people would qualify and it could impact local communities, I think especially at the state level though, I think we could actually see a shot in the arm for the economy by really just, and again, it's a risk, but putting those people who have student loan debts in order to get more highly educated, put them in positions of more responsibility, of places where it could make a difference, especially like I'm thinking at state levels. Yeah, because a lot of those students, including myself right now, I teach part-time with my PhD degree, but I'm actually employed in communications and marketing. And by that definition, I might be underemployed or misemployed, if you will. But if we could somehow tailor student loan debt forgiveness more closely to what people trained in, I think there's a big room for forgiveness. It helps the debtor, and I think it could help those organizations that are employing them too.
That's very, yeah, it's a lot of good thoughts right there, Dr. Petty. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's just this whole topic, there's just so many, it's like an onion, right? There's just so many layers and layers and layers of this, and it's not a black and white issue. There's so much gray in it, right? It's, the more that I research this, I've been researching this topic for 5 years, for the books that I've been writing and the blogs that I write and stuff. And it's just, it's like going down the rabbit hole, right? So that's what led me to you. I was like, man, I really need to find an economist to ask because my knowledge is limited. So, I really appreciate this, Dr. Petty. So the next question is actually kind of a part two of the, will it boost the economy? So right now, the federal student loan payments have been put on pause because of the pandemic, right? And I believe this was part of one of the stimulus packages that was a result of the pandemic. So as of, I think it was last March, so March of 2020 is when the student loan payments were put, they called it on pause, right? So that meant student loan debt borrowers did not have to make any payments. And I don't believe any interest was gonna accrue anymore. And so some of the latest updates were, first it was to the end of the year, December 31st of 2020. Then President Trump extended it 1 month to the end of January. So it was January 31st of this year, 2021. And now actually just before we came on today, which coincidentally enough, we're recording this on Inauguration Day, January 20th of 2021. So I thought that was interesting. But I just read before we came on that it looks like new President Joe Biden is going to sign an executive order, I think today or tomorrow, to extend this even further, right? And from what I just read, it looks like he's going to extend the pause on the payments until September 30th of this year. So it would go till September 30th of 2021. So you're looking at a year and a half, close to 2 years of student loan borrowers not having to make a payment. So the question is, I know that's kind of long-winded, but the question is, have we seen any boost in the economy as a result of this? And it may be a situation where we have to look at it, a year or two down the road and look back to reflect on it. But I haven't seen any reports or media research indicating that. So what do you think about that situation with the payments being on pause for so long?
Well, I do think that so far we have seen the economy not fall as far as it might. The economic activity has been boosted by the fact that without having to pay on student loan debt, these people have been able to instead make the car payment, make the mortgage payment, It helps put food on the table. And, one of the things that has to do with stimulating the economy is something that economists learn about early on, the marginal propensity to consume. And what it boils down to, just real quick, is the lower the income someone earns, the greater the percentage of that income they're going to have to spend just to meet life's regular obligations. Some of those things I just mentioned, food, various payments. And so when you put money in the hands of lower income people, or allow them to not pay as much, maybe even forgive some of that debt, that's basically money well spent to help boost the economy. And by boost here, I just mean, more than anything else, keeping it from falling any further than it has. So, in general, I'm going to support those kinds of policies right now. I believe in, targeted help for those who need it. And out of all the people who have student loan debt, maybe not some of those who went into the medical fields, but most of them don't earn six figures. And
Right.
they're going to be very appreciative for that money, and it will, spending begets spending.
And I think, Dr. Petty, you kind of hit on a good point there, is really the people that are hurting the most with the student loan debt are the people that did not earn a degree, right? They started college or university and went to school for a couple, 2 or 3 years and accrued, $10, $20, $30,000 of student loan debt. And then, something maybe happened in their life. Maybe they had a kid, or maybe, they had to take care of an aging parent. Life happens to all of us, and they just ran out of money. They couldn't get enough loans, or they couldn't, work enough hours, and they just couldn't pay for school anymore. It got too expensive, or whatever. Everybody's story is different, but the people that are really hurting are the ones that never graduated or never earned a degree, and they walked away with nothing but student loan debt, tens of thousands of student loan debt. And, they might be stuck, working 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs. So those are the ones that are really, really hurting. And those are the people that I really, really feel for during this time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the next question, this is another one that I've done an extensive amount of research on this, and this is where I come to you, the economist, because this is a little bit of a head scratcher, right? So if new President Joe Biden ends up, wiping out any or all student loan debt, wouldn't someone have to pay taxes on it? Meaning, would it be viewed as earned income, right? So I think the Democrats are pushing for $50,000, right? So we'll use that number. So $50,000. They want to eliminate $50,000 of your student loan debt. So everything that I've read, and I've been on IRS's website, the official government websites, I've researched this, and everything that I've read, it indicates that if you get $50,000 removed or whatever, relieved or eliminated, that's the IRS looks at that as earned income, and you will now be responsible for paying taxes on that. So it's kind of like, pick your poison. Would you rather have $50,000 of student loan debt that you can just chip away at a little bit each month? Or would you rather have a tax bill of $8,000 or whatever percentage it's going to be that you would owe the IRS immediately? So I don't know which situation I would rather be in, but speak to that situation. And then also, if that is true, would President Biden or the government have to issue some sort of law or change that would, make a change to the IRS's the way that they view that? So what are your thoughts on all that?
Yes, I would certainly think that loan forgiveness in that amount or range would require some sort of IRS tax law change. That $50,000 is not an inconsequential amount of money. And like you say, having that forgiven, that would be considered as income, dollar for dollar. So how do these people scrape up that money when the tax bill comes due? So that would be a problem. It might be that, but let me back up for just a second. There are awesome amounts of government debt being generated right now and have been in this past decade. Amounts that I never thought I would see personally. And that does come due. And so if maybe this IRS tax change for student loan forgiveness could be extended over 2 years, something like that, maybe even 3. I'm just throwing out some ideas. That would actually bring back some money back to the Treasury to service this debt that's being generated. It's overall student loan debt is huge.
Right.
Forgiveness in these amounts might seem minuscule to, I guess, in relation to the national debt, but with large numbers of people paying something back, that would help also. And I would have to think that a lot of people would still see this as a good deal for them personally to have that loan debt forgiven, but having to repay it over time. I mean, sign me up. I would be all for
Right.
that.
Right. So you're basically trading, in essence, we'll just keep using the $50,000 number as the example, because that's what it looks like they want to push for. So and what I've read articles where it said something, it would be 20% was the percent that the tax would be, right? So, whatever 20% of $50,000 would be. So would you rather owe $50,000 or 20% of $50,000? Obviously the lower number you would rather owe than the higher number. So that's easy. It's easy decision to make. But what I want to make a point is this is a situation that I don't think many people are aware of student loan holders that, they're hoping and praying for some sort of forgiveness or help with the government. But I don't think that they're aware that they could get hit with a tax bomb. As of right now, as of the law says right now, unless there's a way that they can change this law or the way that the IRS views this. I want to make people aware that, this could happen as a result. So you have to kind of prepare yourself. And like you said, Dr. Petty, of course, it would be less of a financial burden. So, that's an easy decision to make with that. So the next thing is, nothing is free. A lot of people, I've always been taught there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? But, some people might have different views and theories of that. But going under the notion that nothing is free, how can you just make $1.6 trillion disappear, just eliminate it, just erase it? It has to go somewhere, right? Is it just a big shell game of moving the debt around? Would you just take that debt and just shift it somewhere else? Or how exactly would this work? And who would be responsible for paying it? Does it ultimately fall on the taxpayers once again? How would that whole process work if they end up doing that?
Well, as the scenario that you're laying out would correspond to a pretty static economic situation. That's why if a big chunk or even all of this student loan debt were to disappear, you do have to find a way to get something out of this. We're not in a Great Depression where the people in government at that time, I've seen interviews of these old guys who took the chances during the Great Depression. And they said, we wrote the checks, felt bad about it, but prayed a lot that it would turn out good. You spend against the wind, where if the households are tapped out, if businesses are tapped out, if other countries are tapped out like yours, the only entity in our economy that doesn't have a binding budget constraint is the government that create money. So what risk do you run? If you're already fully employed, and you're just paying people more or forgiving debt, which is an equivalent of sorts, you're just going to create inflation. But even though we're not in a Great Depression scenario, we do have slack, and it is going to take a lot of effort to get us out of this funk that we're in. And and something that has to happen right along with it is this country has to be more united than before. We're good. We can't have hostile workplaces. We've got to get efficient. We've got to get serious about it. We've got to get rid of COVID, and that should be our number one mandate. That kind of spending is going to yield dividends to where, when we lose people, it's not just the old and the young, and they matter. Those impacts impact everybody. Hits hard on our morale and makes us less productive. So I am an advocate of stimulating the economy and worrying about it later. We're not in a Great Depression, but we're not fully employed. There's a lot of potential that hasn't been tapped into, and we've got the problem right now that we need to focus on.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's it's a very fair response. These are all tough questions, and they're very difficult to really, I'm just a regular guy, right? I don't have any type of finance or economic degree like you do. And this is very educational for me to kind of go through these with you, and hopefully others that watch this as well will find some value in this conversation too. Really, it's just a lot of it is just to shed light on some of these topics and alert people of the things that could happen or may happen, or how can we best prepare for different scenarios with the new government coming in with President Joe Biden, and the different philosophies and ideas that he has that are going to be, of course, much different than Donald Trump's campaign over the last 4 years. So the next question, now this one, Dr. Petty, is one that I have not been able to find any mention in any media articles, or I've never even seen this question asked by anybody anywhere. And this is the question of, okay, so let's say that we just go ahead and Joe Biden, whatever, they just wipe out all the debt today. Let's just say today. Today, Joe Biden says it's gone, 1.6 trillion. Everyone's student loan debt is gone. We've wiped it clean. Okay, so what happens to all the students that graduate tomorrow or next week or next month or next year? Is the debt going to be wiped out in perpetuity? Will it be wiped out forever? Will it, or is it just wiped out today? Are they going to start the clock over again? It seems like a cyclical thing. How is that going? I have not heard anybody discuss this particular question or topic of, because to me, so the whole gist is, if my classmate graduates, last week, and he's got $50,000 of student loan debt, and Biden goes ahead and wipes it out, well, he just won the lottery. But if I graduate, next semester, I'm the biggest loser. I'm the world's biggest loser because so that's something that really bothers me, and I haven't really been able to get any clarity on. So what do you think on a situation like that?
So that's an interesting scenario. Just because all debt is forgiven for one group, there's still going to be an ongoing need for others when it comes to higher education. It'd be a good opportunity to revamp the whole student aid process. For as long as I was in school, and we're talking that started in the early 1980s, there were Pell Grants and work-study programs. And the Pell Grants were small, but they actually made life manageable. And there's no repayment. There's no, I have an excess of cash as a young person. What can I do with it? And then the work-study jobs. I was very fortunate to have had two different work-study jobs off campus. One, I worked for a local school district, and second, I worked for the Missouri Division of Employment Security, the unemployment office. And both of those were eye-openers to the world of work and what I might do with my degree. I would love to see those programs expanded. The government gets, in a sense, or let's just say society gets, in a sense, an immediate payment from the student for the money that they're providing for their education. But when you wonder, okay, so compare those amounts to the 1.6 trillion, I don't think those programs are going to add up. That's right. But I think it's a good place to start. As far as the lending program, here again, if there was a way to streamline it without so many middlemen. Hey, Jason, I don't think I've told you this before, but there was a period of about 10 years where I was out of school and I was in forbearance, but a period of about 10 years where I wasn't sure exactly who owned my student loan. Seriously. So how many payments do you suspect I made during that time period? But the interest was just jacking up all the time. And that's how bad that program got. It's where students didn't even know who owned their debt. There ought to be, and I understand, free market principles, but that's not a purely free market situation. Because every time we help somebody become more highly educated, we're helping out society in ways that aren't as tangible as just, money bills changing hands.
Okay.
That's the best I've got to that tough question.
Do you have any specific thoughts on just specifically, like, is it just, I just can't get over, like, are they just going to start the clock over? I just don't know how they're going to handle that, where literally you could have someone graduate one day and, get their debt forgiven, and then someone graduate a month later and sorry, you should have been born a year earlier. I mean, too bad, so sad. That's what I can't quite, there's got to be, someone's got to answer for that, I guess, at some point, on how, we're living in this whole society of, fairness and equity and equality. And that certainly doesn't sound fair at all to me, but I don't know. I would love to hear, somebody try to speak to that, maybe, Joe Biden in a town hall or something like that, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. But do you have any further thoughts on how that could I guess, how could that be handled fairly, I guess, or could it be in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think you could actually structure a program where there's choices. We have healthcare choices, for instance, and sometimes we're able to lower our premiums by having higher copays. And I'm envisioning something, a menu of college aid that could still include loans, but stress more Pell Grants and especially work programs, and then outline from the beginning some new avenues to future loan forgiveness, because that could have easily influenced my career path. I've never lived in an inner city, but I certainly would have considered it if the pie was sweetened in that way. So I don't think there's big limitations to how creative we can get with, some additional choices. We've certainly seen quite a bit of that when it comes to school vouchers for primary and secondary schools and things, private choice options. I think we could see that with student loan debt too. Plus, we need to examine some of the bigger private institutions that have over $1 billion in their endowments and rethink that a little bit too.
In what way? Expound on that a little bit.
Well, there are, when you think of what I was just speaking about, Harvard comes to mind.
Right.
But there's a lot of private institutions. I'm thinking a lot that are religiously affiliated and some have just outrageously large endowments. Do they really need for a student to sign all of their federal aid over to that school when they sign up for classes?
I see.
And I think there could be a large amount of savings for those people who can definitely afford it, and the schools that can definitely pitch in.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, I got you. Very interesting. Yeah. So actually, that's a perfect transition, Dr. Petty, to my next question, because the next question is: it feels like debt forgiveness it would simply just be a band-aid effort, right? A band-aid attempt. Let's kind of dive a little bit deeper, which you just, kind of what you were just talking about. Let's just dive a little bit deeper into this whole issue, this whole crisis, the student loan debt crisis. What, you know, student loan debt forgiveness, to me, I don't think that's going to solve the problem, right? Because you're just going to start the clock over again, and you're going to be in the same situation. It's going to be a band-aid effort, and I hear what you're saying, and you're saying, it's going to be beneficial, but there's going to be long-term consequences, I guess, if I'm hearing you correctly. But what are the big core issues? Like, how did we get to this point, and how can we correct it? Is it just a matter of colleges and universities are too expensive now? Like the cost have skyrocketed with tuition. Is it that simple, or what else is going on that has gotten us to this point today? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I think an examination of the root causes of colleges being so expensive nowadays is warranted. There's a lot of overhead that goes into each institution existing. I think about every major college and their sports programs, and it's mind-boggling. The school that I went to, you can hardly think of it as, upper crust, Oklahoma State University. But how many different uniforms do their football team use every single year?
Right.
That is way expensive. The stadium wars, I think, are just about over. Not really a war, but a big push to make your stadiums twice as big, twice as opulent. Um, so much money that is spent with that. And with the money that pays for that from the TV contracts, it becomes self-perpetuating to where more perks to attract the highest talent, but very little of it gets reinvested in the primary goal of these institutions, which is educating students. And I think that there ought to be a nationwide focus on what these programs can do for not just student athletes, but students. Because some colleges are just lacking in what they provide the everyday student to get educated, to thrive in their major, things like that. And I don't think it needs to be that way. Administrations do become bloated. How high up in the six figures do administrators really need to be? When you look at the coaches for these sports programs, that's 7, sometimes 8 figures. So it's a lot of overhead right off the top that needs to be examined with, why college is so expensive.
Very interesting. It seems like that is the I guess the elephant in the room is just the skyrocketing cost of going to college, and it's resulted in many people feeling forced to sign up for all these student loans, right? Many people feel like that's their only option, and that's one of the reasons why I'm writing that book that I mentioned earlier, was to show people that there are alternatives to traditional college to gain an education without going broke. And that's kind of where we're at with there's just kind of this notion that people think their only chance or their only option to go to a traditional university is to get out all these loans. And I guess it seems like it is a direct result of the exorbitant costs of the university. So yeah, that's definitely something that would need to be, examined, and you know, there's a way to try to make it more available. We hear a lot in the news, Dr. Petty, about affordable housing, right? That's a big hot button issue, especially like you said, the inner cities. Uh, we're here in Atlanta. I know you're down in Florida. I live in Atlanta, and I hear a lot about the Atlanta mayor talking about we need to have affordable housing. We need to, have, this available for people, and that's kind of what I just, we need to have affordable colleges and universities. Where maybe there will be a push for that, in the near future, just like they push for this affordable housing movement. So that's one thing I just thought of off the top of my head. So let's move on to the next question, Dr. Petty. And this is another one that I really want to make people aware of. This is an awareness question, but it's also a question that I'm not really sure what the answer is. Can you file for bankruptcy over student loan debt? Now, everything that I've researched is it's very difficult to do right now. There are cases where people have, I guess you have to go to a bankruptcy court or a judge or someone has to decide this, but there's cases where it can be done, but it seems like the overwhelming majority of situations is you cannot claim student loan debt as bankruptcy. Like you can't claim bankruptcy over student loan debt. And the idea is to claim bankruptcy and then just get that, it would be wiped away, I guess, through the bankruptcy. So what's the whole situation with student loan debt and bankruptcy that you know about?
Well, just the fundamentals. When people sue in bankruptcy court, if they want to file for bankruptcy, it's protection from creditors who depend on these payments for their business to keep running. Here, it's a little bit different with the government as a guarantor of the loan. A lot of people look at that as, oh, so I'm not really disrupting somebody's payments process. It's just the government, they can handle it. But the government really doesn't see it that way. Sure, they could pay off the financial institution that sponsored the loan, but they really don't want to. They would have rather had that institution not make the loan instead of have to deal with it now. But yeah, I've never, and even though I've had bumps in the road with my career where it got dicey trying to make monthly payments, that was never an option, not realistically. I think most people with student loan debt wouldn't know where to start. I can't afford a bankruptcy attorney, that sort of thing. So here again, it's something about student loan debt, especially those who take big advantage of it. You just don't want to contemplate. It's a problem out there that doesn't have any easy answers.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Dr. Petty. You just brought up the idea of, I guess you would have to hire a bankruptcy lawyer, right? To go, and for a situation like this, you would have to go to a bankruptcy court and appear in front of a judge. It sounds like quite a process that could be more, I guess, costly than you might originally think. And then from what I understand, if you do declare bankruptcy, I believe it kind of ruins your credit for, what is it, 7 years or something like that?
Yeah, at least
like you wouldn't be able to go buy a house, or I mean, you pretty much got to wait, I think, 7 years before you can get any kind of loan. Or so there's definitely some major consequences from even declaring bankruptcy, I guess, for any situation, not just student loans.
right.
But yeah, that's one that's definitely a question that has popped up all over the media surrounding this topic. So let's go to the next question. Kind of reverts back to what we were just talking about, like the affordability of college and the rising costs. So we just went through the 2020 presidential season with all the candidates campaigning, and we see this come up every 4 years, right? Every presidential election year, this comes up with a lot of the candidates that kind of, I guess, dovetails with the student loan debt forgiveness, is this idea or this notion of we need to make college free, right? Let's just make it all free. College is free. and no debt, no student loan debt. So first of all, is this even possible? Like how would we even do it? And then of course, like I said before, nothing is free, right? It might be free to you, but somebody else has to pay for it. So that's, so how would we, first of all, can this even be done? How will we do it, and who would pay for it?
Like you said, the no free lunch. It does not exist. Somebody has to pay for anything that is valuable and is put to use. Somebody's paying for it. And certainly a college education is valuable. Um, like I'd mentioned before, it's an investment.
Mhm.
And it's best to make that investment early in life. That's not conducive with having plenty of money to pay for it, but it gives you a longer period of time for you to recoup that investment. That's the major aspect of a college education being an investment, and an investment that pays off more often than most other investments. I mean, typically somebody with an undergraduate degree is going to have 15 to 20% higher lifetime earnings. And that includes the time that they spent in college, if it's just 4 or 5 years. So who's not interested in 20% higher earnings over a lifetime? Doesn't all come at once. It takes that life to be lived and a successful career. The longer you wait, the lower the payoff. It's interesting that the bachelor's degree pays off the most, master's a little less, and PhD a little less also. So it also has diminishing returns as you continue that activity, just like anything else. So it can't be free, but I think there are more payment options available. Like I mentioned, there are some colleges that absolutely, tuition is a minuscule amount that goes into the general budget every year. And when you set that next to their endowments and what they're earning on, it just doesn't add up to much. So I think that there are many colleges that could do more to help the students. I would love to see a situation where colleges competed more for the top students.
Mhm.
A more competitive process. I don't have the answers there. I pay attention to the SAT and the ACT as a screening tool, even as imperfect as they are. But I do think that we could make the admissions process more targeted to put that investment where it does the most good. I don't think it needs to be centralized highly, just some basic rules of the game. Uh, I Americans aren't interested in paying more taxes to someone else. Uh, and in some ways that's unfortunate because younger people now, I think they need the higher education more than ever before. Uh, Everything is so diverse. There appears to be no common base right now in our divided country. And I see higher education as being able to tackle those problems. Uh, I like to see more competition, not necessarily more taxes. And tough choices have to be made. What is a university? Is it the best sports team? Is that important to being the best university, or what the graduates do with the contributions that they made?
So thank you for those thoughts, Dr. Petty. More specifically, just generally speaking, this doesn't have to be college. This could be anything, right? So, from an economist's point of view, if you make something free, doesn't it devalue it? Doesn't it make it worthless? Because that's when I hear make college free, that's my initial response is, well, if you make it free, then what's the value of it, right? Like, so
Right.
what are your specific thoughts on that idea?
Yeah. So it can't be free because those types of situations that you mentioned will find a way to occur. The tragedy of the commons, where everybody owns something in common. So in the medieval ages, this field was owned in common. Everybody's livestock was brought there to graze on it. Pretty soon, it wasn't suitable for grazing because there was no cost to it. There was no effective way to ration it or screen people from using it too much. And the same thing with the college education. If everybody got to do it for free, the students themselves wouldn't place the value on it. Typically wouldn't put the kind of effort. You wouldn't want somebody who graduated with an engineering degree in 2000 and somebody in 2030 where it was just free. I don't think they'd be comparable, even if you allowed for the older person keeping up with the new technology. I just don't think it, like you said, it's undervalued. So it's going to be something that, just like housing, a renter doesn't pay nearly the same attention to maintaining the value of the property if they don't outright own it. And if we don't own our education because it's free and everybody can have it, and you're just as likely to parlay that nothing degree into something as someone who really put the effort into it. It's going to cause major problems. I agree with that. And it doesn't have to be a bricks and mortar. We know so much more about learning styles now. And even with online programs, there are some people that are perfectly suited to learn that way. There's some, it wouldn't be me, but there's so many that are so good at that. They've taken to it. All sorts of options with training programs that are extensions from technical colleges, high schools even, tech. All of it makes your labor more productive.
Very good. And I want to share this story real quick because I think this is kind of relatable to this question that we're talking about here. How I earned a debt-free master's degree was that I was actually an employee of a university here in the Atlanta area, Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia. So I was an employee of the school and was given the opportunity to further my education at the expense of the school through a tuition reimbursement program. So this whole notion of, I guess, one of the narratives of let's make college free so everybody can attend, so it can be fair, right? And give everybody an equal chance and an equal opportunity by making it free. Well, see, I disagree with that because of what happened to me, right? So when I had the opportunity to go to college for free to get my master's, there's two barriers that has to be removed. The first one is financial. I had that barrier removed. The second barrier was the time commitment. I knew that this was a serious time commitment. My wife and I were just starting our family. We had just had our first baby. So I was in that stage of life where I don't even know if I'm going to have time to do this. So basically what happened to me was I actually thought about, for 1 year, I thought about this. Can I do this? Can I make the time to do that? I thankfully would not have to worry about paying for it, but I also have to, can I go to class from 6:30 to 10 o'clock at night, 2 nights a week, and, turn around on 5 hours of sleep and get up and go back to work the next day and work a full day? And can I do that for 3 years? That's a very difficult decision to make. Looking back, I'm glad that I did it, but that's a huge barrier. I think, to me, equally, you have the cost and then the time. To me, those are equal barriers. So if the government or whoever is going to make college free, yes, that will remove one major barrier from a lot of people. That financial burden or that financial barrier is holding a lot of people back. But you also have the time commitment. A lot of people, might be, single mothers who, have to take care of kids, or, someone might be working a couple jobs, and when am I going to go to school? So yeah, that's another, I guess, situation or scenario where I don't really know if making college free would, kind of like they have this envision of like it's just going to open the floodgates and all these people are going to come and take advantage of it. I don't really know if that's necessarily going to be the case, I guess, just based on, my personal experience.
Yeah, that's great because you went all through what an economist considers the financial constraints and the time constraints. And it made me reflect on my time, where as a master's student, I was a teaching associate. I actually was able to teach courses after a one semester kind of under the wing of a full professor mentorship. But I taught and went to school. And so in that way, it was rough. I was engaged at the time, and it was really tough trying to make all these things happen that you really, really wanted to happen. Required so much effort, so much grit.
A lot of sacrifice for sure. Well, Dr. Petty, I have one last question, and this is another kind of an awareness question, but more of like a curiosity question. And from all the research that I've done, well, first of all, the loan business is big business in our country, right? Credit cards, student loans, auto loans, home mortgages, that just the whole loan industry in a whole, it's a huge business, right? Interest rates are really high now with credit cards and whatnot. So from my research, and please tell me if I'm wrong, just from what I've researched, it seems like the federal government is profiting off of student loans. So to back up a little bit, from what I discovered is I would say about 10 years ago. So in 2010, during the Obama administration, the federal government took over complete control of the student loan industry, right? So before then, you had all these different, like you were saying, you had so many different options of loans or, get credit, get debt. And around 2010, the student loan industry was completely taken over by the government, which means the government now owns that market, right? Now, it's true that you can still go out, students can still go out and get loans, like they can go to a bank or whatever and get us a loan, but it's not going to be a guaranteed loan. It's probably going to have a higher interest rate. It's not going to be as good of a loan, the terms that you can get from the government, right? So basically the government has complete control of the student loan industry now is my point. So from what I've read, the federal government is loaning $100 billion a year in student loans to students. So I'm not sure exactly what type of revenue they're making off this, but I do remember a quote from former President Trump. This actually was before he became president. I think this was in 2016 or 2015. This was before he became president. Someone asked him something about the student loan debt crisis, and he said, if there's one thing that the federal government should not profit from, it's the student loan industry or student loans. They should not profit off of students trying to earn an education and better themselves and get a good career. So here we are, from what I understand, the federal government is indeed profiting off of students from these loans, right? So which leads to the question, why in the world would the federal government want to forgive student loan debt if this is a revenue stream and they are profiting off of it? So correct me if I'm wrong about any of that, but what are your thoughts on that whole notion?
Well, I can speak to it to a certain extent because all of my student loans they were generated far in the past. And I had recently, just at the end of last year, I refinanced it. And it turned out that the servicer of my loan is now the institution that I started off with 30 years ago. the Missouri Higher Education Loan Association, MOHELA. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. They're the ones who originated the loans. And so I don't think I've had a loan directly owned by the government. I'm not sure exactly when they made those changes in 2010, how the actual functioning is carried out. Yeah, I'm just at a loss there. But I do know that originally the idea is you mentioned a young person going into a bank without any government interference and getting a loan. It's just that not being able to show much income, they would have to have a co-signer.
Right.
So it's easy to think of the government as that co-signer.
Okay.
Now, just like a dad who co-signs for a car loan for his kid, he doesn't profit a whole lot. His pockets don't get stuffed with cash, but there are benefits from it in many situations. You don't have to go pick up your kid now from all the various activities that they want to participate in high school and later, college. If they go local, they can drive themselves. But the thing that I know for sure that our government and society gets out of student loans is the fact that when it goes as planned, when a student successfully graduates, repays the loan, and is still able to have enough to experience economic growth each year, the country is better off. You have one more highly educated person paying their taxes and participating. That's the thing about the market system. It's so great for those who can participate. And people who are ill, maybe from birth on, they don't have the same opportunities, and that's an economic role for government to step in. I do believe that education, higher education, also is a role that the government has its hand in and should, because of the spillover benefits that are generated from that. But you're making me want to do some more research on the way a student loan is currently generated, and all the I's that must be dotted and the T's that must be crossed, because that's something that I'm far away from, even though I'm not far away from the student loan debt.
I hear you. Well, thank you. Those are all the questions I had, Dr. Petty. Now we'll just kind of close with any final thoughts that you might have on anything that we talked about, or just general, or anything that we didn't get to discuss wrapped around this whole student loan debt crisis. Any final thoughts or words of advice or wisdom of maybe any thoughts of how to avoid student loan debt, or ideas of how to do it differently in the future that you might want to leave us with as we close?
Well, even though at age 57, having went through a substantial part of my life where that loan has been a monkey on my back making decisions for me, I still don't regret the route that I took. I got into higher education and pursued it as far as I could because I enjoyed learning. And it didn't come easy to me. I think that it played a big role in me being basically all that I could be. As somebody who grew up on a rural part-time farm in Northwest Missouri, and yet as a highly educated person, I feel like I can talk with anybody, and being able to relate to anybody from any background, I think is something that's precious. I think this country needs to pursue more of it, and I think we'd all be better off if we could think about, could I talk to anybody and have a good conversation about things, and not just be civil, but be united in that way too. I'm surprised that came out of me right now, but it's got what I'm feeling. January 20th, 2021.
Very good stuff. Well, Dr. Steve Petty, the Economist, thank you so much. for your time. This has been extremely helpful, insightful, and educational. And I hope a lot of people who watch this will be, I guess, enlightened or educated on this whole situation that our country finds itself in, and in an effort to learn, how can we do this better, right? So this is Jason Brown saying thank you so much for watching. If you want to check me out, support my endeavors, you can check out my website, which is yourmarginmatters.com, or you can check out my book, Margin Matters, on Amazon. That's available on amazon.com as well. So thank you so much for watching. And remember my favorite saying, it's not the amount of money you make, but the margin that matters the most. We'll see you next time.